So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you and the different times of the world because we are joined virtually by many people from across the world. So thank you everyone and welcome to the session, Building Climate Resilience in Urban India. I'm Monica Setia. I'm the Associate Country Director at Harvard University's Lakshmi Mittal Family South Asia Institute. I'm joined here by my team at the Delhi office, Amit, Angarika, Reenan, Shreya, and Sushma. Some of them you met outside, some of them are in the room. You see Shreya and Angarika that side of the room handling the Zoom part of it and the hybrid mode. So in terms of the session, we will be spending around next 90 minutes together. After my brief introduction to the Mittal Institute and the climate platform that Mittal Institute hosts, I will invite the chair of the session, Professor Holly Samuelson, to take the evening forward and engage in a conversation with our wonderful panelists, some of whom are joining us in person, Chitra and Rajan, who are sitting right on the right side of me, and others who are connecting online, Monto, and unfortunately, Anna Dyson could not join us this morning. We're missing out here. Also, Monto was supposed to be here, but he had very last minute change of plans due to an unavoidable obligation and was forced to join virtually. But thank you, Monto, for invariably making it and joining us at the session. So thank you so much, all of you. As the room gets filled, I'll just tell you a little bit about how the session will run. The session will primarily involve questions posed by Professor Hawley to the panelists. That will be followed by a round of audience questions and answers, both for the in-house audience and the audience who are joining us online, the virtual members. In terms of the logistics, the Zoom attendees are requested to put their questions in the Q&A box. Audience in the room, they can raise their hand or unmute themselves and put their question out. I just request everyone in the room to please put their phones on mute for the duration of the session. Uh, the restrooms I know are somewhere outside, right on the right. Okay, thank you so much. And some of the water bottles are out there on the table at the corner. There are also the glass bottles with some paper glasses. So if you're thirsty, help yourself. Um, so let's begin by understanding a little bit about what brings us all together here. Besides, of course, your interest on the subject, the Mittal Institute at Harvard. Mittal Institute is a university-wide research institute that engages in, is a research institute that at Harvard that engages with faculty members, students, and also in-region students and scholars like all of you here to disseminate knowledge, build capacity, and inform policy. We work across the region in different countries of South Asia by facilitating research scholarly exchanges. We have multiple fellowships. You can go to our website and know more about them. Some are India-based, some are Cambridge-based. Cambridge, a part of Boston where Harvard is located and where Mittal Institute is located. We support Harvard students and faculty through grants. We also build on the way a community of stakeholders who are committed to engaging on issues that are pertinent to South Asia. And through this process, we built our climate change platform that began in 2023, which was focused on South Asia, which includes doing research projects, training programs, and also exchange fellowships. We have multiple projects and initiatives that run through this climate platform, which includes a session that we're doing today, but also various research projects that are underway. We have the Climate Verse project, we have the Community Hats project, just to name a few. I won't get into the details of it in interest of time. We also host conferences, workshops, sessions around the subject. So today's session, like I said, is an example. We have done publications, various policy briefs, op-eds. We in fact did a production of a public service video on heat stroke awareness and protection last year, which was this very recent summer, which was in collaboration with the Indian Met Department and the National Foundation for India. We have supported various faculty at Harvard on their grant work, which is relevant to climate, which is as part of our regular faculty grants, but also very recently we've launched the Mittal Institute Faculty Climate Research Grants for 2024-25, which are for faculty at Harvard again. And Professor Holly actually works with us on one of her research projects through the research grant that we have offered her. Thank you so much, Holly, for that. I'll let you read more about the Mithil Institute and our climate platform on our website, and you can follow us on our social media channels. So turning back to our session today, I invite our chair for the session today, Professor Holly Samuelson, who is an associate professor of architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Holly has been teaching architectural technology courses. Her teaching and research focus on building design issues that impact human and environmental health. Her current projects harness advanced building simulation to investigate greenhouse gas emissions, heat vulnerability, and indoor environmental quality while considering the future of buildings in a changing electricity grid. A recognized expert in architectural technology, she has been interviewed by national and international media outlets, including Washington Post, BBC, Boston Globe, and Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you all the panelists for joining us today. Over to you, Holly, to take it forward from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica, for that lovely introduction. I would add that I'm also a lover of Indian food and art, and I'm sad that I can't be there in person. But thank you, everyone, for joining us in person, and thank you for joining us virtually for the virtual audience. And welcome to the Building Climate Resilience in Urban India panel discussion. Thank you to the Lakshmi Middle and Family South Asia Institute at Harvard University for hosting an event on such an important topic. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. So our goals are to discuss the existing and possible climate change impacts from the built environment in urban India, gaps and opportunities for addressing climate resilience and sustainability in this sector, and how to address inclusiveness in climate change response for the built environment. So we'll have three esteemed panelists. I'm going to do a brief introduction, then I will ask them some questions, and then we'll have a question and answer time for your questions. So please think of questions as our panelists are talking. And if you're joining us virtually, you can type your questions in at any time in the Q&A window in Zoom. And I'll try to ask our panelists as many of those questions as I can. So let me kick it off. I'm not able to share my screen. Are you able to, sorry, should have checked that out earlier. Are you able to enable screen share for me?
Yes, we're doing that. Just give us a second.
Okay, great.
I think you should be able to do it now.
Wonderful. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see them. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so resilience is such an important topic and growing even ever more urgent every day. So when I started teaching, these were my intro slides to explain to my students why I'm interested in these topics. And honestly, these are seemingly generic problems in seemingly far off places. And then over the years that I've been teaching, which is the past 12 years, I've had students in my classes whose families were home, and we have a very international group of students at the GSD here. We're over 50% international. So while I'm teaching my students, I've had experiences where their families are home facing down wildfires, floods, and hurricanes, and more. So all power to these resilient students who talk about resilience, manage to still find interest in their scholarship while they're dealing with all of these anxieties. I will admit that this is an old slide that I've been using for years, and it didn't occur to me to label it. And I didn't know that I would look back years later and not remember which California wildfire this was or which Houston flood this was. I remember which hurricanes these were because we had 3 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico in one moment. So I hope that we don't go back to that. But it just goes to remind me why we really have all our work cut out for us and why everyone in this room is doing the work that we do. I wanted to mention that I teach a course, and this is my intro slide for all of my lectures in that course. And I actually had one student in my class who said, "Hey, that's my hometown." So I mainly focus on heat and indoor thermal vulnerability, but we all know there's so many issues that we need to be working on. There's storm events and flooding and sea level rise, and I'm so glad that you're all working on these issues. And why are we seeing more and more images like this on the news? I mean, as many of you know, climate is changing. We are seeing more extreme weather events. Also, we've managed to roof over and pave over much of our cities that used to have more permeable materials. So in a rain event, there's sort of nowhere for the water to go. And so we're seeing more and more flooding from those kinds of events. And this used to be building design from 3 very different climates. I try to pick climates that are as different as I possibly could. And here is how humanity used to provide for wellness and thermal comfort when the building design itself was relevant to the climate. Then for much of my career, we went through this era where this was how we were building buildings across the globe in all of those climates. So this was no longer using design to deal with the climate. This was handing all of that relevance over to mechanical systems and to cheap fossil fuels. I think we're beyond this era now, and we have to go back to not exactly what we had before, because life has changed, technology has changed, but to the idea that we have to do with design what we once did with cheap fossil fuels. I just wanted to point out that this is a topic that's getting a lot of attention suddenly. Last week in the New York Times, there was an editorial calling for the naming of heat events, like we name hurricanes, so that we can acknowledge that these are, in the US at least, heat events are the worst natural disaster in terms of mortality already. And I know that India has even hotter events and even more of a challenge ahead of them. Even back in the US, though, this was Friday's headline in the Washington Post, calling heat the disaster that no major US city is prepared for. And I think that a lot of global cities and Southeast Asian cities, unfortunately, could say that as well. So thinking more globally, if climate change and we continue on this business as usual path, 1 to 3 billion people are projected to be left outside of the climate conditions that have served humanity well over the past 6,000 years. And what this study is suggesting is that this hatched area, which includes 3.5 billion people, will experience annual temperatures that today are only experienced in that black area of the globe in and near the Sahara. And I know that we can see that much of South Asia, where the Middle Foundation and all of you do your work, is included in this. So I'm so glad that you're all working on this. I also want to talk about resilience to fossil fuel emissions. So I think that resilience to climate change and sustainability go hand in hand. And I think that this slide helps to underpin that idea. This was a pre-COVID study from Harvard and 3 UK universities, where they said that 1 in 5 deaths globally were caused by fossil fuel emissions. And that is a staggering number. That's 8 million deaths annually. But even if these numbers seem a bit high, the former research on this topic was from the World Health Organization, and they set the number as at 1 in 8 deaths globally. So I think it goes to show that reducing energy use in our built environment is good for public health, as well as designing for our occupants. I'm very grateful to the Mitchell Institute. I have a grant from them, and this is the project that we're working on. We're in the early stages, so don't ask me about results yet, but we're looking at what to do about hot roofs that turn into hot ceilings and how can we protect occupants. So very grateful to the Mitchell Institute for that. So I will stop sharing there. And let me please introduce our esteemed panelists. I'll introduce all 3 of them, and then I'll hand it over, or I'll start with the questions, I should say. So first, we're honored to have Chitra Vishwanath. Chitra is the principal architect and founder of Biome Environmental Solutions, a multidisciplinary firm working in the field of ecological architecture and intelligent water and waste designs. She graduated from the School of Architecture CEPT India in 1990 and has been a pioneer in economical and ecological architecture ever since. Thank you for joining us, Chitra. Then we also have Monto. Monto is a professor at the Center for Sustainable Technologies of the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. He is an architect with a master's degree in civil engineering and doctoral specialization in sustainability. At IISc, he founded the Sudesi Lab, which works on multiple disciplinary research in the sustainability of buildings, renewables, product design, and manufacturing. And Monto and I just realized a few minutes ago that I had emailed him in 2012 asking him for one of his papers. So we have a long connection. And finally, we have Rajan Rawal. Rajan is professor at CEPT University and a senior advisor at the Center for Advanced Research in Building Science and Energy at the CEPT Research and Development Foundation. His work focuses on the energy performance of buildings and cities and thermal comfort, cooling, and building materials. He is a member of various national and international technical core committees. So thank you to our panelists for joining us. And I forgot that when I showed our Mittal-funded project, I wanted to give a shout out to my research partner, Mayuri Rajput, without whom I could not be doing this research. So thank you, Mayuri. Okay, so let me kick this off without further ado. Chitra, let me ask you, can architecture / the building industry go beyond spatial making to address planetary crises of food, water, energy, waste, materials for construction and air?
Okay, yeah. Yes. Can it be on a slideshow mode, please? Yeah. So Holly, taking forward from your speech, I would like to talk about how design can do more than what we're doing when we have fossil fuel. So this is from my recent memory in Bangalore. The February to May, Bangalore suffered with summer. We've had high heat. We went to 38 degrees, but for Bangaloreans, it was really very hot and dry. And there was no water in many parts of Bangalore, or at least 30% of Bangalore. And this is where I see the disconnect between building and lifeline needs, especially water. Next. So I come to this bit of this saying, what was the population when we started the industrial age, and when we coined the term Anthropocene, we were 3 billion and now we are 8 billion. So just giving that context. Next. So we're looking at how can buildings address more than just the spatial needs, because and that would be the lifeline needs of water, food, energy, shelter, and also air. Can it be something more? Can buildings be permaculture of solutions? Next. And especially in this era of climate change. Next. Yeah. So, no, sorry, the earlier one. I'm so sorry. So I'm looking at it like an architect and like an individual, taking Stephen Covey's The Circles of Influence. Circle of concern is climate change, the present environment. Circle of influence, as an architect, we can talk to our clients and the policymakers and others, students. And circle of action is where we design, how we design, and how do the individual take it forward. Next. So because 37% of the carbon emissions come from our buildings, 47% of greenhouse gases. So it's important that buildings become vehicles of change, and they can bring about a lot of difference in the way our future is. Next. So this is what happens. It's a usual building in any place in India, especially mostly with terraces. So we're looking at terrace as an element in the design and how it can be an agent of change. Next. So these are the 5 needs: water, food, and closing the loop of human waste, energy, shelter, and air. Next. So let's just take water. And please notice the lines on the side, the blue lines. There will be different colors. And when we start looking at water, we need water for cooking and drinking. It's about 7 liters. And then you need for other needs. And So we've worked out the numbers. If we're looking at the rainwater harvesting and we treat the wastewater and use water saving devices, we need about 62 liters per person per day. And how we can source it. Then this is all Bangalore's climate and how much area would require. And we would require just for treating the grey water as well as for harvesting water for drinking and cooking will require about 3.25 square meters. Next. But treating the human waste, we require much more area because we can use what we produce as waste as fertilizer, nitrogen. We all do that, and we are basically walking and talking factory of fertilizer. So how humans can be part of the whole system in terms of making of food. So we would require about 33 square meters of area to just treat our waste. Next. Then with energy, I'm looking at only solar here, both solar thermal and solar lighting. And we would require about 2 square meters per person. Next. And if we have to build, and if we are in a city like Bangalore or many parts of India where you have lateritic soil, we can get the material for construction of wall and roofs from below our feet. So if we dig about 1.25 meters below our feet, we could take out enough earth to make a 4.5 meter high building for the purpose of one person's accommodation. So it will be about 22 square meters. So what we need on the terrace is almost double of what we would need as a footprint. Next. And yeah, this is the theory that you need 7 to 8 trees per person. Next. So what happens if we now bring all these together? We need just about 40 square meter per person to meet our food, water, waste, energy, and also construction needs. Next. And that's a working solution. Here we're growing rice on the terrace, we're growing other foods also like banana and things. We're treating the wastewater, catching the best water from the cleanest roof where we don't have the dog walking or we're not growing rice with human waste, but you have the clean roof, and that supplies the drinking and cooking water throughout the year. There is an eco-sand toilet which is used for the fertilizer and then treating the wastewater for watering the rice on the terrace as well as for flushing. This all can happen in just 40 square meter. Next. So this is what I'm ending with, saying that you only need 40 square meter per person. And I'm waiting. If Holly asks the next question, we have the next bit.
This is fabulous. This is really fascinating. So, Chitra, can the idea of the 40 square meter per person be applicable in an urban scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. So we took a Bangalore area, 741 square kilometers, a population of 11 million. Terrace needed is 440 square meters, the square kilometers. Just half of what's available, what's the area of the city. So UNHG, whatever it is, it says that you need about 45 to 50% as open spaces, which includes roads and parks. So we can do it. It is possible. Next. So I just wanted to show this and ask all of you to say, what's that? Don't put next. What's the yellow square? Can anyone guess? We needed to accommodate all the people in there. So he's saying, I can get your name. The area that yeah.
Maybe I'm Honey. I'm from JNU. I'm doing my PhD in geography on climate vulnerability in Mumbai city.
Okay.
So maybe from what you have presented, this is the area we need to accommodate all the people in India.
Yeah, I'm a little sneaky. Can you press the next one? This is for the whole world. So what we want to see in future is where we start thinking quite differently from the business as usual now. And we have to, and it is possible. Because like Dipesh Chakravarti says, we can't be hoping that we will have lesser number of people or we won't have fertilizer. It's because of the antibiotics, it's because of nitrogen, and it's also a lot because of concrete and steel that we are all having better and longer life, inclusive of plastics. So we call them all villains, but they're all needed because what we are now, or better health or more numbers. But it's how we use our resources if there is a different way of thinking. Next. That's most of our terraces, adding to urban heat island, adding to flooding. Next. If we look at it as smart roofs, we can mitigate heat as well as mitigate flooding and be a reproductive space within the cities. That's it. Thank you.
May I just ask one question? Sorry.
Is it
May I just ask you one question?
Yes.
This 40 square meters,
Yes.
is that residential or are you including roads, parks, and work buildings?
No, it is residential. I'm
Okay.
talking about an
Right.
individual.
All right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chitra. That was fascinating and gives me great hope. So let's move on now to Monto, and then we'll come back to questions for the panelists at the end. Is efficiency the way forward to achieve net zero?
Yeah, I think this is a question that I was also discussing with a industry-related panel discussion, right? Say, for example, Schneider, Siemens, they all talk of improving efficiencies by about 4%, right, every year. Now, the thing is that while you get more and more efficient, whether it is in your appliances or whether it's in your transport, there is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? And effectiveness is actually where we are falling short, right? And I'll give you an example. If you take our own individual energy consumption per capita, right? Say what I was consuming 10 years back. Leave the consumption related to offices and stuff like that, but just look at personal consumption. Your mobile phone, laptops, at home, the appliances. The per capita energy consumption is only going up. It's not going down, right? And it's going up because of efficiency. And primarily what efficiency is doing is that your ownership cost goes down. Typically, it's called the rebound effect, right? Now, if you look at the manufacturing side, efficiency makes a lot of sense because there are economic returns, right? And today, efficiencies are already reaching theoretic efficiencies if you look at various manufacturing processes. So things cannot get more and more efficient. And unless and otherwise you start capping the per capita energy consumption, it's going to be very difficult to achieve net zero. The reason is this: photovoltaics, wind energy, they are not so environmentally friendly as it seems, just because the conversion is clean. But there are already concerns about end of life photovoltaics. What are people going to do about it? There are already concerns about dismantled, composites and all coming from wind farms. And in fact, there's a colleague of mine by name Maria Thacker. If you look up a paper published in Nature Ecology, she's actually looked at the impact of windmills on the evolutionary progress of lizards, right? So if I just cite her work, the wind farms actually displace the larger order raptors, birds, and when the larger order raptors are displaced, their role in a population check of the ground lizards actually goes off. And the ground lizards are territorial. And because they're territorial, their size matters. The color display during the mating season also is something fascinating there, which I also studied in terms of, okay, what hormones generate what colors. But now, since their population is not in check, they are no longer territorial. They have to socialize because there are a larger number of these reptiles within a small area, and their size starts to become smaller, right? So we have to look at in terms of, what is happening right now is the urban areas are the guzzlers of energy, right? And we are putting up wind farms, we are putting up solar, in places which we call are not so productive. Some farmlands are also getting converted. Now, is that really net zero? Right? So this is something that we need to examine moving forward, because already even just 2 weeks back, there was a Supreme Court ruling on, places in Gujarat where a lot of wind farms are being put, traditional grazing lands are being converted for solar, and what really happens to the biodiversity, right? So that is the first question. So efficiency is not going to lead to net zero.
So that's really interesting, Monto.
I'll give you another example. Take Bangalore. If you take the vehicles are getting efficient, if you look at fuel efficiency or mileage, but if you look at an average travel speed about 8 to 10 kilometers per hour, right? And you're looking at on an average 1 or 2 people per car, and then try to calculate what is the energy required to transport one person in a four-wheeler in Bangalore. It's way higher than what it was 10 years back. Right? So what is efficiency doing? So the numbers actually prove otherwise.
That's very sobering. So Monto, if efficiency is not the path to net zero or zero carbon, what is the answer? So what
So I think,
gives you hope?
see, the issue is that I think there's some interesting information that Chitra had also shared, right? Net zero works if you can live off the land that you occupy. Right? And these studies have been done in terms of ecological footprint and stuff like that. There are these ecological footprint calculators and bio footprint and stuff like that. But we are not really bringing those into the calculations when we are talking of net zero. Carbon neutral is a different perspective totally, but net zero is something we are really missing the actual message. We are saying, okay, we are, do we account for the embodied carbon? Right? So people get carried away with it, and then a lot of ramifications, particularly in India, because 60% of India's population is still rural, and our total per capita consumption is low because it's getting averaged over a population that isn't consuming so much. I'll share some information on that, but that's where we are. I really don't know whether efficiency is driving things up. So take, for example, the mobile phones, the chargers, the laptops. At one time there used to be an iPad to the house. Now it's every iPad to a person. And each of these iPads actually are talking of higher efficiencies, processing powers, and this and that, and recycling and stuff like that. But eventually, per capita energy consumption or resource consumption is only going.
So you talked about this is really interesting, and you talked about these renewable technologies like photovoltaics and wind power, and a number of the hidden consequences of these, and I might add mining, some of the rare elements that need to go into these. But if we think of all the problems of humanity, climate change being one of them,
right?
And then I always think of the idea of a triage in an emergency room. Like someone is coming in with a heart attack, someone else is coming in with a broken thumb. What do we need to do first?
Tell me something, Holly. How many people in the world are really worried about climate change?
Well,
Researchers are definitely worried about it. and people who are actually affected are worried about it. The people in between don't care about this.
So that might be a question. How do we address that? How do we change that?
It's difficult. It's difficult. See, I'll share some research insights. There are some, yes, there are some positive approaches. There are some existing potential that we already have, resilience that we already have, and we've got to see whether policy can actually come in. And that's where I had suggested the second question.
Well, that's a great kickoff. Okay, so Rajan, are technologies available to meet
Ollie,
future needs? Oh, sorry, wrong one,
yeah.
wrong question.
Let me just go.
Sorry, I jumped ahead. I was reading my wrong question. Forgive me.
So, no, I just wanted to carry forward the two questions and probably what Monto was saying about efficiency. Probably will not. I mean, we are sort of reaching a plateau, and still it is not going to give us. Two example which I want to give. One is about a net zero building, which we are operating in my university since 2014, and would like to share a little bit more about that. So it's a net zero building. It's not net zero energy, net positive energy. We are positive by about 8 to 10% a year by year since 2014. But it's just about energy efficiency. It does not, when I say 8% or 10%, does not talk about embodied energy per se. Now, with some of my colleagues, the kind of work which we did, what if we start looking at the embodied energy of the material which has gone into making of this building, and not just about material of making a building, but also HVAC systems and lighting and so on and so forth. If we start looking at, okay, we need to replace lighting by 3 or 4 years, HVAC equipment by 8 or 9 years, or probably 10 years. And even it has a solar photovoltaic, which has a life of 23 years, 24 years, 25 years at the most. When will be able to neutralize this embodied energy? Operational energy is 10% plus. That means that additional every year, this 10% can offset my embodied energy. And if we start calculating it, replacing some of them and so on and so forth, it comes to about 72 years. I don't know whether even building will last 72 years or not. So net zero, operational net zero, and a net zero carbon, they are very, very different thing. And I think we really need to make a distinction. And what are we talking about net zero? So that's little taking from what Monto was saying. And second, about these, he gave an example of transport, that amount of cars per person or per family, and how much do you really, really need to transport one person in terms of volume. Probably I would like to bring in one of the slides which I have, and if I can help, take help from tech team, probably slide number 18, and make it full screen. 18. Slide number 18. Yeah, go down, go down, go down, go down. That's it. That's it. Just go. No, down. 18. Slide 18. Go up. One up. That's it. What is a thermal requirement for a human being? Probably right now I'm generating 60 watts, 65 watts of energy. If I start running on a treadmill, I might generate about 120, at the most 130 if I'm really, really running at 12 kilometer per hour kind of running on treadmill. So let's say on top line, I might generate 130 watt of energy at any given point in time. That's what you see on a leftmost picture. If I have about 3 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter room, and in Ahmedabad, that room, to bring that room in a winter time, It is closed room with a one window on one side and another window on another side, let's say north and south. Amount of heat which will be required to remove from that building or that room would be about 3,800 of watts. I need about 130 watts to keep myself comfortable. I need to remove 3,800 watts of energy from a room to keep myself comfortable if I'm in a building, in a closed building. Let's say I need to operate and I'll add some computer or let's say printer or microwave, whatever it is. I will require about 1.2 or 1.36 ton of an air conditioner. And this is what building does to us. If you start air conditioning your building, you need 130 watts. What you need is about 300 times more to keep yourself comfortable if you are inside the building. And this is very similar to what Monto was saying, that you are transporting about 70 or 80 kg of a person in a car, which is, I don't know, what's the weight of a car, probably 600 kg or whatever it is. And that is what we're doing. So the way I understand from automobile engineers, if 4 people sitting in a car, and if car is running on its own, average per liter consumption will not go down more than 0.5 liter per kilometer. Not 0.5, no, 0.25 liter per kilometer. So that's basically car is taking 95% of its own weight. And that's where we are emitting X amount of carbon. Let me stop here and then probably I can talk a little bit more later on.
Okay, thank you, Rajan. I love how all three of you are kind of wiping the slate clean and saying, what if we start from the basics of what we need? How else could we provide this? And I think we need to do that sometimes instead of starting with the broken system that we have today. So I'm really enjoying this. But Monto, I wanted to ask you a question. What is the role of diversity in building typology for resilience to climate change?
Yes, here I would like to just share a few slides and then, can I do that?
Please. A reminder to the audience, please think of your questions, and those of you online, please feel free to type in your questions to the question and answer. It's the little Q&A at the bottom of Zoom.
Is the slide visible?
Yes.
Yeah, so like I said, I just put it together during the initial talk that we had. So this is an ongoing work, or rather a work of a student who's just submitted, where we looked at climate reclassification, right? And what we did is that we looked at the various climatic zones that are already there in India, and we projected 3 scenarios, the IPCC scenarios, to see, okay, 2000, from 2020, what really happens, right? So this is still unpublished, so I just request you to note that. This we published, right? And we found that out of the 310 locations that we examined across the country, about 70 to 80 of them across the various IPCC scenarios, growth scenarios, will require a reclassification, right? And we also found that we might have to coin a new climatic zone called extreme, right? And moving forward, this is again a work which probably Rajan has seen, because this won the Best Paper Award at the Comfort at the Extremes conference in 2019, where we said that if the current climate zone doesn't hold good, then it either becomes drier, or it sort of goes to temperate zone. And we looked at a case study in a place called Sugainhalli, which is about 90 kilometers from where we are. And, this we are familiar in terms of thermal comfort, right? And what we found is that between vernacular dwellings, traditional dwellings, and conventional dwellings is what we build in the city, typically, you can see that current profiles of thermal comfort versus changing climatic zones, the traditional dwellings are far more resilient as they are in passively being able to, remain climate responsive, right? But these are houses which are changing falling to modern aspirations. I'll show you more about it. And what we also did was that this is again of another student who looked at the earlier one was temperature primarily. The second one we looked at moisture, right? Moisture content in the air. And this was a student who actually is from Bokaro. And again, this is work which won 2 Best Paper awards consecutively at the Building Simulation Associations, at University of Bolzano. And here we looked at the ability of vernacular dwellings, earth-based dwellings, which are hygroscopic, in maintaining indoor moisture levels which are conducive to breathing, respiratory comfort. And these are the transitions that we are looking at. And just to add some values before I go back, we have traditional dwellings typically have embodied energies of less than 2 gigajoules per meter square and operational energy of less than 1 gigajoule per household per year, right? And Holly, I could recollect the slides that you had shown in terms of all the glass buildings and where we stand. So that is at the extreme left. Those buildings will have embodied energy in excess of 8 gigajoules per meter square and operational energy of greater than 42 gigajoules per household per year, right? So we are talking of a 40x from vernacular to modern in terms of operational energy and a 4x from bare minimum embodied energy. And this you multiply it with 0.6 or 0.7 billion rural population in India. Add China also. China also has about 65-70% of rural population. I mean, where do we have the resources or the energy, even if we are looking at renewables to meet up for this sort of thing? Now I'll come back to the moisture related work that I was telling you. And if you look at the 2 graphs below, what we found is that despite external variability in moisture content, the conventional dwellings actually show a much wider variation through the day than vernacular dwellings. And this we attributed to a phenomena called moisture buffering, where hygroscopic materials, particularly earth-based materials, are able to absorb and release moisture depending upon the moisture content in the air. And we actually even looked at prescribed moisture contents, where if you see this wide range is what, in the same location, the range of moisture content variability as compared to traditional dwellings, which is in the red band, right? We also looked at, we modeled the respiratory tract, and we tried to find out what happens if you're breathing air which is very low in moisture content. And what typically happens is that the trachea actually compensates for the moisture and warming of the air before air enters the lungs. And typically, when the air enters the lung, it needs to be saturated. And this is what we found in terms of moisture deficit, right? In vernacular dwellings, the deficit of moisture requirement for breathing comfort is much lower than in conventional dwellings. And these are dwellings right next to each other, right? So these are not dwellings separated, where we can say that climatic influences are varying. So I'll stop with this, and I will stop sharing. So the whole idea here is that, see, typically vernacular dwellings, I have relied on materials that are locally available. So in one sense, they are affordable, they are accessible, right? The diversity of variability we have is immense, right? Unfortunately, we are looking at a lot of standardized ideologies of buildings, right? But if we were to actually take up and study vernacular dwellings across, even you had shown a few slides about it, it can actually already provide us an inertia that we have to withstand climate change, or some resilience that we already have, which we are losing, right? And I feel we need to leverage diversity if we have to look at climate change resilience. And whatever I'm showing you are non-air conditioned, naturally ventilated buildings, right? And their thermal comfort profiles are way better than what you can achieve in air conditioned buildings. So I'll stop with this.
Thanks so much, Monto. I think that's a great, hopeful place to stop. So why don't we move on to Rajan again, and then we'll go back to more questions. So Rajan, What change in the role of the building sector professionals, such as architects, engineers, and contractors, do you see in the next decade?
Like people need to talk to each other. They don't. And especially, probably I'll put responsibility to the academic institutes also, that they don't really teach engineers and architects that you need to talk to other people. On one side, we are seeing in a medical science where super specialty is taking place, but a doctor will not take a call on anything unless looking at X-ray and pathology lab test results. That means he is relying on somebody else to take a call. And I don't think that in a building science or building contractor or even building engineers are doing that kind of reliance on it. So I think a point which Monto talked about a little bit, I will extend that we really need to diversify the kind of solution, or we need to look at the diversity of solutions. And to bring the diversity of solution, we need really, really diverse approaches, and we need to talk to people. Right now, we don't.
May I just ask a question from the floor, please? Are we just going to listen to all three of you, or can we come in and make a few comments and a few remarks? I'd be very grateful if you could tell me. Then I would sort of think of.
We are absolutely going to open it up to audience questions.
Is it okay?
I only have one more question left, and then I'll hand it over.
But I'm fine. If you want to raise right away, we can address that and probably come back to what we.
Great. Would you like to ask your question now from the audience? We can take that one now and then move on.
I have a couple of observations on what I've heard, which has been extremely illuminating, and they sparked a lot of thinking in me. First of all, Chitra, you said 40 square meters per person or per family?
Per person.
Per person, all right. I worked out, I decided, let's see what that means for a city like Delhi, which has 22 million people. 33 now. Well, let us just sit at 22 just now, because I've got the figures. If it's 33, we have to multiply by so much more proportionately. 33 upon 22. Okay, let me give you the figures. It then means that the urban space required, for the residential space required, is 880 square kilometers. About 40 kilometers by 22 kilometers, or 21 kilometers, the 22 kilometers. But urban space, as any town planner will tell you, is only, residential is only 1/4 of the space you need in a city. So that makes it 3,520 kilometers squared for a city of 22 million and 5,200 square kilometers for a city of 33 million, which is what we are in Delhi. Now, we are nowhere near that, and nor can we, in fact, possibly spare that kind of land on a global level when we have 8 billion people already on the land. So I think that we have to start thinking this afresh. And I do have.
I have to. Small numbers,
Oh,
because
yes.
it's numbers, because it's the roof area that you need 40, the land area you need half of it, 20.
Okay. Well, that helps, which means about 2 floors or something. Okay, fine. No, that houses it. That makes it. Let's say it brings it down from 3,500 to 1,700 square kilometers. We're still talking of a lot of things. Why I'm pointing this out is not because that it shouldn't or can't be done or anything like that, but that I think we have to think a little bit further and realize that the model of living today, that we moved from the villages and the countryside into cities, and that the assumption that this move is going to continue or even remain static, stabilized where we are, this has to be given up. Cities, as you've just said so eloquently, are extremely energy intensive. Living back on the land is not. Now, I'm not going to take any more time. I just want to say that I've been a visiting fellow at Harvard with Mike McElroy for the last 5 years, and a book of ours is coming out where we actually describe how, for India, going back to the land will resolve both the problem of decarbonization and the problem of unemployment and the problem of urban congestion and huge urban pollution that we have today. I don't want, it's not an advertisement for the book, please, let me show you. But I say this because I think we do need to think of we have to think in a certain perspective. 6,000 years human beings have been developing. For all except 250 years of this, land was the source of wealth, status, peace, war, everything. Only in 250 years have cities become important. We have to go back to the land and we have to find the technologies for doing it. They already exist. Our entire book is on this, and I'm not going to say anything more on that. But there are others working on this, and I'm seeing the work all around developing very rapidly. So, I mean, thank you very much. But we need to go back to the land. The era of energy-intensive industrialization in urban focuses is over. If the developing countries don't realize this, then the world is finished. Thank you.
Thanks. So I just take this forward. Now, there are couple of backup slide which I put, and if you can go to number 25, and I just want to extend what gentleman was talking about. Can you pull 25, which is last one, even after thank you?
Sorry, I didn't tell my name. My name is Prem Shankar Jha. I'm a journalist and also a bit of an author. And, I have, as I said, been working for 5 years with Mike McElroy at the School for Engineering and Applied Sciences at Harvard.
Thank you. So this is one of the book called To Sphere. And what I really liked about this table is that author is talking about various stages of society, where you can see the first column, the second column, pre-industrial, industrial, and post-industrial. And if you start looking at what is the profit yield? Just an example, in pre-industrial era, it was extraction. You start extracting and you get a profit. In industrial, it was you fabricate it and you get a profit. And in post-industrial, you analyze it and you get a profit because it's all about data. Now, if you start looking at that, the second last and last factor, which is nature. In pre-industrial area, nature was a context. In industrial area, it was a resource, and probably now it is a solution. And this is where probably we might need to look at diversity, that the amount of diversity which nature has. I think what we are doing by making buildings all look alike is we are actually killing the diversity. And that's what the problem is. And last column, ecology, where in pre-industrial area, abundant nature. Ecology was sort of polluted and depleted during the industrial time. And probably what we need to look at is more sustainable part of that. That's again is where we go back to how do you really retain the diversity. Now, coming back to current numbers within some example, and why am I saying that we need to have a diversity? I will differ a little bit from what Monto was saying about efficiency part, but we have not reached the theoretical efficiency of 100% in many, many, many places or many systems in a society. Air condition is one of the example. If I give you a little bit of context of where air condition sits, if you look at the LED bulb has reached about 70% of theoretical efficiency. That means if you provide a 1 watt of electricity, it will give you 0.7 worth light. 0.3 will get into heat and stuff like that, which means that we have reached to 0.7 in a laboratory condition. It has reached to 0.9. So in 3 or 5 years, at least in market, we will see 0.9 theoretical efficiency of LED. If you look at a solar photovoltaics, it's 50-50. That means 50% of solar radiation, which is coming on the solar photovoltaics, turns into electricity. Another 50% adds to the urban heat island. And we are putting solar panels left, right, center. In terms of air conditioning, 1912, somebody really made an air conditioner, not for human being, for printing press. And since 1930, no development has taken place in air conditioning system or engineering per se. And right now we are stuck at a theoretical efficiency of 12% when it comes to air conditioning. Now, why does this happen? It happened primarily because we relied only on one technology, very similar to internal combustion engine in an automobile. Here we stuck to the vapor compression cycle called technology. And entire market adopted that particular technology. So we are at the stage right now that 70% of components of entire world's air conditioning components have been made by one country. We can imagine which country is that. And out of that 70, 90% of compressors are made only by two people. That's the amount of inertia which we are looking at. Now, when you have to deal with this inertia, you need to do something very, very drastic. But point is that because we do not have a diversity in that particular technology, we are stuck. And that's where we really need to look at the diversity almost in every quarter, whether it's materials or a design or a technology. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I think, Monto, you've had your hand up for a while, so we'll go to you. And then I do want to leave some time to open it up for questions. I have three good questions from the audience. So,
Yeah,
Monto.
a quick input to Mr. Prem Shankarja. There's a book called Economy of Permanence. You must be familiar by, I think, the Gandhian economist. The name just failed me. Okay, it's called Economy of Permanence, and the book was written in the 1940s. And the book actually talked of decentralized distributed development. And unfortunately, with the Gandhian and the Nehruvian ideological differences, the Nehruvian philosophy took off. But the book actually referred to development which does no irreparable damage to the environment, right? And the book was written in 1940s. So just an input, I'm sure you might, I won't be surprised if you probably know of this book.
I don't, in fact, and thank you very much because I'm going to look for it. I'm sure we'll find a copy somewhere on Google now. That's the great thing. One of the few good things about Google.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and read one of the questions from the audience.
J.C. Kumarappa, who was the
Yes, J.C. Kumarappa, yes, you're right. That is the
Gandhi, and he was the one who, in fact, brought about the idea of 5-kilometer radius, 5-mile radius.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chitra. J.C. Kumarappa. He's a Gandhian. He had a PhD from university in the US, and he joined the Gandhian movement. And yeah, thank you.
So here's a question from the audience. Chitra, can the design ideas mentioned be applied to the existing housing structures? But can the design ideas that you mentioned, Chitra, be applied to existing housing?
Yes, because most of the houses have terraces. See, we've used concrete and steel so much, and what we have to really use them for their best.
Great. Here's another question from the audience. Can nature-based solutions like afforestation and improving green cover help in net zero, and I might add help in resilience, as they are considered to be inexpensive and inefficient? Sorry. It says, okay, I was reading that in my head, it's inexpensive and efficient, but the question is, as they are considered to be expensive and inefficient.
Yeah, I think this nature-based solution is also really taking people for a ride at many points in time. Again, we need to understand which nature and where. Chitra is doing a lot of work using laterite stone, but if I start mimicking using laterite stone in Ahmedabad, it's not going to be sustainable. And this is what is happening. When we say nature, we start planting tree left, right, center. And even we start linking the lakes so that lake will look beautiful even in the summertime. What we are doing, we are actually losing the cycle of evaporation in the drier lakes. Even in the summertime, lake starts evaporating the water that adds to the uncomfortable outdoor situation in a drier place, which anyway is supposed to be drier. And you need to accept it. Don't change the microclimatic conditions by bringing a nature-based solution. In Ahmedabad, if I don't have a tree next to my building, I should be okay. Don't try to make my building with a lush green lawn, having a lot of water going on top of it and green tree. And this is what is happening in architecture. And let me take a little bit of diversion here. If you start looking at plan section elevations of many institutes which has been designed by modern masters in India, you will see their fantastic approach to deal with the local climate. Let me take an example of IIM Ahmedabad. The way IIM Ahmedabad was designed with a reasonable high thermal mass, small windows, primarily somebody looked at the hot and dry climate of Ahmedabad very nicely and responded to sort of correctly. Then what happened? We got a green lawn outside IIM Ahmedabad because we wanted to mimic somebody else. We started getting a green cover across the campus. Campus has changed its microclimate, and the building, which was designed for hot and dry climate, is actually combating the moisture, which is not meant for. And what we get is finally an air conditioner. And then we blame an architect that, oh, he did not design it for climate. No, it's not. You have changed the operational procedure, the way building is to be designed. Sorry for the cynical comment, but I think it's important that nature-based solution, nature in Ahmedabad is nature of Ahmedabad. Don't replicate it in nature in Bangalore.
Yes,
So I think that depends on how you define.
Sorry, Holly, I have to interject too. And I don't use laterite blocks. I use earth from below my feet, and that could be done anywhere. If you just have, it's very versatile material. You have to you have to talk to others. So you have to talk to testing labs. Okay, this architect talks to many others. So you have to talk to others to understand the soil, because as an architect, I cannot really have a setup in the office for it. So we talk and we decide how to use that soil. And that also when we have to talk to the structural engineer to know how that wall has to be designed. And I just want to tell everybody that my study was based on Bangalore. Okay. It's a lovely place to stay. So that's where everybody is coming to. And so these 40 square meter per person has to be now researched and done for different cities. So please do it. I've given a little base about it. So yes, but nature-based solutions are not only for construction, and it's not for bringing Narmada water to Sabarmati, which has made Ahmedabad humid. That there are many other ways of solution. First of all, we have to accept that we will be 8 billion and then we'll become 11 billion. We cannot selectively remove some people and say, okay, now so many of you don't survive, then we can be much more comfortable. We have to accept that we will all be here. And we all are here, like I said earlier, because of antibiotics, because of nitrogen. That's why we have so much more food. And we are also living much longer. We used to die at 55, 40 or something. But there were more children who were dying. And now it's not so many children dying. So all of it is good. So it has happened. But now we have science, we have understanding where we have to start seeking solutions through science, not through mythology. At least I hope we stop doing that. But we have science to back us. But we need science for our region. And that's where we have to be very careful. And 3 years back, World Bank said we'll be buying in India an air conditioner every 15 seconds or something like that.
10 seconds, one air conditioner gets sold in the world.
No, but this is in India we'll be buying. And if we in India buy that many air conditioners, the whole world is gone. So it is important that we in India have to have this growth, because of we have to have a basic level of human development index. We have to have that minimum amount of energy per person, minimum amount of water per person, health. So we have to develop. It is, in my humble opinion, the West should stop consuming the way it is consuming. It has to start looking at it as a global issue, not your own issue. and then put it on us to now say, no, you should not consume, you should use solar, you should use these things. And that is adding costs to our living.
I think we have a comment, but Holly, we have a couple of questions in the room. If that's okay, we can take them.
Yes, please.
Mr. Shah, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, I think others should speak.
Okay, sure. Okay, I think we have a question here. Oh my God, that's a lot of questions. Okay, lot of hands are raised. We can't take, we have just 10. Yes.
Let's
we-
take someone who hasn't spoken yet.
Yes, well, we have a lot of people in the room. Maybe the lady on the extreme right to me. Introduce yourself very quickly, just your name and where you come from, and then put it.
Hello.
Yes,
Okay.
please go ahead.
So my name is Ishba Hilal, and I'm not related to architecture in any way. I did a biotech BTech and master's in biotech also. Then I did a master's in finance. And I agree with Ms. Chitra saying West consumes a lot. I was in US for 2 years and my consumption rate went crazy. I got scared. I came back. I am someone who works in the junction of a lot of things. I've worked in data, I've worked in education, I've worked like a bunch of places and did science and finance. So my questions come from a more holistic sense of the market in general and just how we consume things, including buildings. All of the earth-based solutions that we've been seeing, and I'm a lover and an admirer of all the tiny house movements, the earth-ship movements, and all of the, off the grid kind of stuff. I've been following that for a decade now. But this is all an alternative lifestyle, right? It's not for consumption of the normal people who have their own lives. And how do we rebrand eco-friendly architecture to fit the mainstream now? Instead of just being something, the people who want to go on treks in the mountains
I'm
do.
answering that. I hear a lot of that. Yeah. So again, I come back to my city, favorite place in the world. We have about 100,000 buildings, and they are, I think, 99% of them are middle-class homes. And that's all because of what happened, the studies and work which happened at Indian Institute of Science, as well as at Auroville, and that has come about. And this, I'm talking from 30 years of my practice. And we have now about 700 architects in Bangalore who are practicing. And in India, and India is the one in the whole world which is setting standards of this kind on building with earth and building with stabilized earth. Let's be very clear of that. Building with earth and also working with various kinds of wastewater ideas. Well, yeah, energy we're taking on to this, but these two things India is doing. India is doing a lot of work. There are a lot of people. It's now the society which has to start asking. You're not asking. You just see how many square foot will that my apartment would be and how much it would cost, and you go and buy. If society doesn't ask questions, you won't get answers.
Other way of looking at it is let's not change the definition of architecture. There's nothing like eco-friendly architecture. Architecture is eco-friendly all the time. There's nothing like green buildings and green architecture. Architecture, if you look at the definition of it, it has to be green. So let's not change the definition and say, what happens? Just responding to you. Eco-friendly, why can't it become a mainstream? No, it has. I mean, you're putting everything upside down. Architecture has to be eco-friendly, and that has to be a mainstream. There's nothing like alternative to that, right? So stick to the definition of the topic, and then we can talk about more.
Let's go to another question from the audience. We're running low on time, so if you could please try to make your question brief.
Okay, I think we have a hand raised.
Well, since
But if-
Professor Chitra Madam has talked a lot about Bangalore, recently I've had a chance to visit the presidential towers, which is supposed to be the tallest residential building in Bangalore, Yeshwanpur. So what do you think? Is it eco-friendly? In most cities, I see that 50% of the population live in slums. I mean, their lives are subhuman. On the one hand, we talk about the great knowledge system of India, but 70% of your population live a subhuman existence. So where is the application of all that learning, knowledge? And then on the other hand, you have the trajectory of growth in terms of development and GDP. So all this is very chaotic and confusing.
You have to go back to reading.
So, but your comment about Bangalore's presidential tower, which is the tallest residential building, going right up to 50 stories, and they have got very good, elegant terraces and all that. So is that considered to be something architecturally sound, viable?
No, it is a parasite.
Parasite?
Yes. Because it
I'll tell
cannot
those
provide
guys.
for any
Well,
of
thank
these
you.
ecosystem services.
I think somebody wanted to comment. You'll have to come up to them. Sure. Yeah.
I'm a sociologist, and I was also an urban fellow at Indian Institute for Human Settlements. And I've researched Bangalore for almost quite like for 6 months. And I've gone to the settlements and I've seen that terraces are also a space where, because it's quite densely packed, and terraces are source of sunlight and ventilation. And often the human activity that takes place over there is like drying your clothes or other things like your pickle making, and all of these things happens on terrace. So how does that how can that be accommodated if we make these into like greenly spaces? Like where will that human activity go?
Am I the only one who's being asked so many questions? See, you guys give such difficult charts and everything.
That's defense mechanism.
I talked about 40 square meter per person. Yeah. You can have the treatment of wastewater and you can dry clothes above it. That happens. It just takes half a meter and you can dry clothes above it. But this was, again, an idea. And as such, Bangalore has the highest number of wastewater treatment systems in India, in any city. And we don't have to treat our wastewater on our terraces. This is an idea. So we treat wastewater in Bangalore through nature-based solutions and mechanical solution together. We transport it 100 kilometers from the city to Kolar, and there the lakes are full. And there is biodiversity now growing up, and this is all the wastewater from the city treated. So Bangalore sends away 80% of its water which comes to it, and it's sharing with others. So what we're talking about is an idea. Many things can happen. You can grow. You can make pickles. You can make papad. Though it's very difficult in Bangalore because there's only 2 months of sun. There isn't enough sun for making papad or anything.
Can we have one last question?
And
I
not
think
to
one of
me?
the two ladies, I mean, on my right, whoever is.
It's the mother-daughter duo.
Okay, well, you guys decide. Yeah, you can share.
Mine should be relatively quick. I'm wrapping up my master's at the GSD in the new real estate cohort. Holly, you must be familiar. So for my questions for Monto Online, what then do you think like we should be focusing on in India as like technological improvements? Like, does that be focused on like as something as simple as like more efficient air conditioning systems? Because people are talking about everything under the sun right now, and things are, really progressing in the prop tech, climate tech, infra tech space, but doesn't seem to be percolating down to, to solve what we're looking for.
If I get the question right, you're saying how does one live a low resource life with all the technology and access to development?
Or like what technological innovation should we as the next generation be focused on? Like that can actually help solve climate resilience in India, for example.
What do you think?
I've been in the US for about a decade now, so I'm pretty, I'm now just trying to understand the Indian climate. So I think you'd be more equipped to answer.
Right. See, I'll tell you one thing,
Let's just.
meaning, sorry. See, the problems are no longer local, right? The problems by and large are global, right? The issues, the kind of waste that you generate here in India and in the US is the same. right? The kind of lifestyles people are aspiring for, the fact that we are connected online, we are doing this is all sort of global, right? And the energy consumption, whether it is carbon neutral or net zero, all of that is sort of a global sort of a connect, I would say a connected thought process. However, you need to, like I said, leverage on local knowledge, local skills. And that is what even the IPCC reports and the UN also says, that look at local knowledge because it's locally relevant, look at scientifically validating them. And see, do you belong to Generation Z or what?
Yeah.
Where do you classify that?
Yeah, like 97. Yeah, Gen Z.
Right, right. So there are a lot of literature. See, my doctoral work looked at attitude as a determinant of sustainability, right? So if I'm able to examine your attitude, I'm able to go about and say, okay, what is the built environment that you're likely to bring about? And is that likely to be sustainable? Right? And the issue with Generation Z is consistency. They want quick solutions, easy answers, and be happy quickly. But unfortunately, their contribution to this, I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying, looking at some papers that I'm reading on the issue of Generation Z and even their academic performance and research pursuit and things like that, they're confused, right? And the problem is that there isn't one answer that is going to solve their problem or their confusion. You have to specifically pinpoint as to, because everyone's aware, people have traveled, they have seen Europe, they have seen US, they've seen India, all of it. But then you have to finally piece yourself together to find out what is it that you really want. And the issue or the problem is that the clarity is lacking there. What is it that you really want? And that's a problem with the current generation.
What you asked, are there any technology solutions? There are. We have three fundamental sources of energy: sun, wind, and biomass. Everyone's talking about sun and wind, not biomass. No one's talking about biomass. Why? Because all the thinking that for us, we idiots, the thinking is being done in cold countries where biomass is not significant. Okay. Now, actually, they're also wrong. It is significant there too. But the point is that there are technologies we go back more than 100 years, which have been forgotten and which are now being revived and have been revived. The International Energy Agency has a series of reports on this, by the way. Like we're talking about municipal waste. I'll give you two examples. There's a plant that has come up in Reno, Nevada, which is converting municipal waste into aviation turbine fuel. It's been going now for 2 years. And that aviation turbine fuel is flying aircraft and nobody even knows about it. 125,000 tons a year of municipal solid waste, producing 45 million gallons of American gallons of aviation turbine fuel. A plant 3 times this size by the same company is now nearing completion in Gary, Indiana. They have 5 more cities which have already signed up with them. By now there will be more, but I'm a little out of date, a year out of date. That's only one small example I'm giving you. The whole point is that crop residues are your source of carbon. Everything in the world is made of carbon, oxygen, basically, and hydrogen. These 3 things. Now, the most abundant source of carbon is greenery around you, which is converting the sun into carbon. All right, but that greenery, we don't think about it. 80% of that green, 20% we consume. 80% is crop residues, forestry residues, municipal waste, etc. And no one thinks about that. And yet that can be, that the technologies have existed for more than 100 years that convert all this into carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and oxygen. Oxygen you can get anywhere from the air, okay? And so I would suggest that you look up the International Energy Agency reports on the Task Force on Biomass Gasification.
Thank
The International Energy Agency Task Force on Biomass Gasification. Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Just one last
Wait, I
question.
think
Just
we're
last one.
very
question
much
to-
over time.
Okay.
Can we do it offline? You know, like with one of the members here in the room? Is it okay?
Sure.
Yeah. Later, maybe you can do that. Holly, over to you. I think we'll have to wrap up things.
Well, thank you so much to the audience online and in person with your inspirational questions. I'm feeling hopeful about Gen Z and the rest of you. There's so much energy and interest in these issues that I'm really looking to see what technologies and what solutions you all come up with as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to the Mittal Institute, Monica, and to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you to the wonderful audience. Thank you all panelists. I know we missed out on certain questions. I can see there were raised hands on both on my left and right side, and there were a few online questions. We're sorry about that. Maybe we can take them offline. We have some of the panelists in the room, so they'll be happy to stay maybe for just a few minutes to answer a few questions. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Be in touch. Follow the Mittal Institute platforms. You can know more about our sessions. We have actually another one coming up next week, which is on water resources. Rinan, who's sitting here, is convening that session. So join us next week again at IISc. But thank you all again. Enjoy the evening, and we'll see you soon at another session of us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.